俺が見てきた奴らみんなそうだった。酒だったり女だったり神様だったりもする。一族、王様、夢、子供、力。みんな何かに酔っ払ってねえとやってられなかったんだな。みんな何かの奴隷だった。あいつでさえも。
Just like so many other shows out there, Attack on Titan is outstanding. Yeah, I know, what a brave opinion, what a hot take. I mean, it's obvious, but it is still true. There are so many things that make OT so great. Along with its remarkable animation, unbelievable plot twists, and hype moments, it also has amazing storytelling, incredibly well written main and side characters, and natural world building. But not just that, also natural world building and relatable side characters.
Sasha, pass some gas, Commandant.
Why am I not surprised?
Everyone knows it goes hard, but not that many people, or at least to my knowledge, genuinely appreciate the unreal amounts of effort and hard work Isayama must have put in to make OT so amazing. But was it perfect? Was it truly a masterpiece? Considering it's one of the most influential and groundbreaking manga / anime to come out in the last decade, some people are inclined to think so. However, some other people think that it's just overhyped. I have my own personal answer to that question that is a bit of a hot take, so stay tuned for that. This video will be partly exploring what makes AOT so great, but also some of its flaws, and suggesting a few corrections. So that's what this breakdown / analysis will be. I won't just be praising OT, I won't just be acknowledging all the things that it does right. I'll also just be honest. I'll take an honest look at Isayama's greatest work, Attack on Titan. In my opinion, Season 1 is quite underrated. Sure, it is a bit generic and predictable at times. Sure, it is a bit edgy as well. But it's also really intense, and it has some great foreshadowing for some of the moments later on in the show. I want to talk a bit more about the foreshadowing in Season 1, such as the one on screen. Isayama included a lot of little hints and clues for what could come later on in the show, and even some of the bigger plot elements in the later seasons. I know that foreshadowing in a show doesn't immediately make it good, but Isayama's confidence in telling a somewhat generic, but also fresh and exciting story that hadn't really been seen before, and at the same time dropping little hints and clues or plot points in the near or far future honestly isn't talked about enough. I mean, the man knew what he was doing from day one. Isayama set a lot of important foundations for character motivations, impactful deaths, some of the main themes of the whole overall story, and so many other things. Season 1 was a bedrock of AOT's themes, structure, tone to an extent, and core message. In a later video, I'll talk about Attack on Titan's core message. While Season 1 is somewhat typical and predictable in its plot, I really don't think that it gets enough praise for setting the base foundations for some of the big plot twists to come in later seasons. To say that Attack on Titan only gets good in Season 3 Part 2, which I've seen a bunch of people try to claim, is doing a disservice to the legwork that was put in by Seasons 1 and 2. But it's not just the foundations and foreshadowing for later seasons that make Season 1 great. It's the fact that, despite all the mature themes of racism, cycle of oppression, freedom, consequences of war, nihilism and apathy, Season 1 still manages to keep a somewhat cheery and wholesome tone. There are the underlying themes which I just mentioned, but there are also themes of moments of camaraderie, resilience, teamwork, and friendship that are spliced in between the bombastic fights and the hype moments. In this video, I'll be covering all of the events from the beginning of the manga and anime up until the end of the Tross battle. In part 2 of this video, I'll be covering everything else up until Annie's defeat. For this video, I will be starting with how the main characters are portrayed in the anime and in the manga as well. With Eren, he has the same hard-headed, strong-willed, and passionate and impulsive personality, which are attributes of both his strong determination to be free and his equally strong determination to protect his friends. However, in the anime, Eren is driven more by a shared dream with Armin to experience freedom, rather than solely the desire to kill Titans. With Mikasa, while she still has the same silent and stoic personality in the anime, she's a lot more reserved and quiet. This is probably because she communicates her feelings through mostly looks and actions, and stuff like that is easier to portray in a manga instead of having to animate it. Because of this, in my opinion, in the anime she comes off as submissive and passive, instead of loyal and assertive. I know that might not make much sense considering her submissive nature is a part of her core character, and also why she develops later on in the other seasons. But because conveying subtle and nuanced expressions and faces into animation is quite hard, and considering Attack on Titan is full of having to convey those subtle expressions, she comes off as silent and shows little emotion in the anime, as opposed to the manga, which has a lot more of these low-key expressions that I talked about earlier. Overall in the anime, she still looks and talks the same, but she feels a bit quieter. Armin in the anime is pretty much the same. He has the same personality, looks the same, and overall acts the same. He is a bit more submissive and timid in the anime, and doesn't actually show much growth throughout the season, although you could say that for all three of them. One other change is that there is a stronger bond between him and Eren in the anime. It makes sense though, because they have both shared the same dream, which only strengthened the bond that they already had. There are more scenes of them interacting and being buddies with each other in the anime than there are in the manga. There are also more scenes of Armin interacting with Annie as well in the anime, rather than the manga. Overall, the main trio feel and sound and feel the same in the anime as they do in the manga, with a few small differences and changes. In terms of plot, themes, tone, and characters, Season 1 is a very faithful adaptation to the manga. There are no major plot points left out, and it adds some extra scenes which is sometimes used to highlight some of the messages in the manga. But there is a structure. The anime has a much less linear approach to instruction. It all begins with a walking of a and everything begins with a sound. But then suddenly the manga has as a time skip to the future. Now everyone's trained, prepared, and ready to fight. They were not ready. Then, in one of the most hype moments in the whole show, Eren uses a boulder to plug up the wall. We then switch to a random training montage between the main cast. To be honest, I really didn't like the structure in the manga, because it meant it didn't feel personal, and it meant we couldn't really connect with any characters other than the main trio, and also maybe Jean. However, it takes a much more straightforward and ultimately better approach to structure. The simpler structure helps us to care about all the other characters. We care about Reiner, Krista, Marco, and Sasha. The only person in the show that doesn't really help us care about is Annie. Well, that's just my opinion. In the anime, we see all these characters that we know and care about have to go through all these insane missions and dangerous objectives. A great example of someone who had to go through all of this but still survive would be Jean. Now, I don't really have time to do an analysis on Jean in this video, so just subscribe if you're interested in the Jean character analysis. There are also added scenes in the anime such as the one on screen now. One of my personal favorites is a scene where Armin begs Eren to eat the bread and he isn't, but Eren refuses. Because of his refusal, Mikasa forces him to take it. I love this scene because of how the early elements of how these three act and treat each other is established in such a small but powerful scene. It's scenes like that make us care more about the anime main characters rather than the manga main characters, especially Eren. I know I said that he basically acts the same in both versions, but not really. We care more about anime Eren, and we're much more emotionally invested when he dies. This isn't really the case for manga Eren, and his fake out death feels somewhat cheap. This isn't meant to be a harsh critique or anything, it's just how I personally feel about how Eren acts and is portrayed in the manga. Basically, the anime's restructuring means we care more deeply about the main characters in the anime. The restructuring good. The Battle of Trust. In my opinion, the key theme of the Battle of Trust is fear. The fear of dying, the fear of losing those you care about, and most of all, the fear of Titans. But it's not just about fear, it's about overcoming it. Our main cast have to overcome all of these fears, and once again, the best example of this will be Jean. Jean at the beginning was a coward. He was scared, but the Battle of Trust made him overcome his cowardice, inspire others like him, and become a leader. This is shown throughout the Trust battle, and it applies to each of the main cast. My favorite example of this is Mikasa. She was worried for Eren and feared she might lose him during the battle, and that eventually didn't end up happening. Once Eren was gone, she feared she had no purpose for living anymore, but she overcame that fear and moved forward. Like I said, this theme applies to each character in the main cast. I really enjoyed the Battle of Trust, and I liked what it represented in the overall season. It showed that our main characters have been through a lot, but there's still so much more to be done, and they need to get stronger together. Also, as just a side note, the scene of Eren putting down the boulder is one of my favorite in the whole show and deserves all the praise it gets for how rewarding it felt to see our main characters succeed. In summary, the Battle of Trust really shows AOT's strength as a series, and it highlights just how much potential the show had from the beginning. Isayama knew how to structure his show, knew how to structure his manga, knew how to lay out the fights, knew how to develop the characters. There are only a few flaws I'd have with the overall manga/anime. That'd just be the presentation. It felt a bit sloppy and a bit rushed at times. But again, to be fair, this is just the beginning.